Welcome to DysFictional, an RPG-focused podcast. I'm Ginger, professional film industry victim.
I'm Tukey, former academic and former rogue.
I'm Randy, the random generator. What? Why?
I'm very, very dead.
Very, very dead?
Very, very dead.
Not just mostly dead?
Like, stabbed repeatedly and then caught in an explosion.
Oh no, I hope they caught the guy.
Oh no.
I mean, technically, yeah.
I mean, did you at least get to see them go out before you died? Or, like, was it epic? Or
I sure did. I watched them go as the explosion then took me out.
Good.
Oh, well, I guess it's a good thing that I'm the cleric. So I probably have to fix that, huh?
Yeah, you're going to bring me back, right?
I mean, what's it worth to you in diamonds specifically?
Somewhere between 300, 500, or 1,000.
Yeah, I'll think about it.
Should have gone to Ross.
Should have gone to Jared's. That's
Yep.
Jared. No. That's funny. Yes, of course I will bring you back if we get out alive first. You don't have to worry about that part because you're not with us.
I don't have to do anything. It's actually kind of nice.
Yeah, you just lie back and relax and, we'll take care of everything. And maybe next time you can be a rogue again.
Just be careful to touch her gently. She's very crusty right now.
I'm very crispy and
Ew.
melted.
Crispy kitty.
Her skin will stick to you. It smells
Gross.
like burnt
Ew.
hair.
D&D is a fun game, huh? Like, it's just, full of magic and wonder and fantasy and, like, only happy thoughts.
And death.
So much death.
Or maybe mostly just me, I guess, but yeah.
Well, speaking of being a cleric,
I don't die.
you die more than anyone. You're the DM.
True, that's fair.
You're every NPC.
Yeah, every NPC is expected to die.
Just in a constant state of death? That sounds
Yeah.
horrifying.
Oh, no wonder you, hate us so much. That would suck.
So much.
Well, speaking of clerics, I thought that this week would be a good week to talk about some of the classes, since we did a brief overview before, and what we have personally played, what we liked about them, features that we want to highlight, and things like that. And as the current cleric of this campaign, I thought we could do cleric first, because I am clearly the most important party member in the group.
Uh-huh.
Wow.
Really? You're going to wow me after you just said I have to bring you back to life?
Okay, all right. Hold on. Yes. I apologize.
Mhm.
Yes, I agree with everything that you said. Until next week.
Yeah, next week you can go back to being your typical rogue self. But this week, grovel.
Too bad you're not the only one with a deity, because everyone else could be brought back.
Yeah, that would be nice.
Yeah, you should really reconsider your life choices.
Nah, they've gotten me in a great spot so far.
You think you're in a great spot right now?
Yeah. Yep.
Having a grand old time.
No worries to have.
Well, I'm glad to hear it, but I still think that the cleric is a very critical member of the party. If you have a party that doesn't have a cleric, it can sometimes lead to problems. We've talked a lot about this, but especially at high level play, healing is a little bit lackluster,
Yes.
for lack of a better term, in D&D. The good heals are really high level spells and they're very expensive. Anything below, say, 6th level is a little bit inefficient. So even if you have a lot of the healing spells as a different class, like, say, a ranger or a druid that can take, Healing Word, you're not going to be popping people back up all the way to full health or even half health most of the time in all of your encounters. I, in the current campaign, am playing a war cleric, but in the least efficient way possible. I literally don't even have a weapon. I got rid of it because I was able to find a legendary item that did really good healing. It can cast heal 4 times per combat, and that has been the most critical thing since we got it, just to keep everybody going and keep everybody up, because we're fighting some really, really strong bad guys. But the War Cleric subclass does have a lot of really cool features. It's a way to kind of double as a paladin, and when you pair it with certain feats, it can be really strong, especially feats like Warcaster that allows you to get advantage on your concentration checks for holding all your spells. It also allows you to hold a shield and still be able to do your somatic spell components on the battlefield. So there's a lot of melee benefits to being a war cleric that I'm just kind of not using because we are playing a dual class Gestalt campaign. So I supplemented with something else. But there are a lot of really interesting cleric domains. And I think some of the cooler ones are the life domain has a lot of really interesting features and traits. The Twilight is sort of a newer one, isn't it? I'm not super familiar with when it popped up, but it's really powerful.
That was from Tasha's Cauldron, so it is one of the newer ones, yes.
Yeah, that one has a lot of really cool potential. And then, of course, one of the more well-known subclasses at this point are the Trickery domain and the Grave Cleric from Campaign 2 of Critical Role for Jester and Caduceus. A lot of people got a little bit familiar with those types during that. And that was really interesting because as two clerics in a single party, you had one that was more the support that could do the buffs and protection spells, and then Caduceus acting as sort of like the person that would do the debuffs and the like Bane and things like that on the enemies. And that was a really cool back and forth that they would do a lot between the two of them to be really effective. That's kind of hard to do with just one cleric. But yeah, I've been having a really good time playing a cleric this go around. It is a little bit more stressful. If you don't like to be the healer in your other types of games you play, then, you know, just know that even if you're a war cleric or a trickery cleric or a cleric specifically designed to curse things, your party will always still expect you to heal them, even if that's not specifically what your build does. And be prepared to put up with a lot of their bullshit.
I would say that's a little yes and no with that. For clerics, like, they don't have to be healers or supports. They have one of the best spell lists in the game, and Tempest clerics are a really good example of one of the highest freaking damage dealers in the game. Like, the fact that they could do max damage on, I believe it's thunder spells, it could be lightning. It's one of those types of spells. But they could deal max damage, and when you're throwing out a Thunderbolt for like 40 damage, I mean, that's going to knock out some things, and it's really cool to see. The cool thing about a cleric is they're so universal. Like, you have the Arcane Cleric, who is basically like a wizard cleric, and you, like you said, the Death Cleric. There's the Nature Cleric. There's all these kind of clerics that can provide more of a different flavor. And the cool thing about the domains is that you can pick a domain based off of what you want to do. Clerics have some great utility spells as well, more of like a crowd control sort of power. I say that they could fit a support role pretty well no matter which way that they go. But the great thing about their domain spells is that they can add a lot of punch to your power. Like the Moon Cleric actually can add Moonbeam to its spell list, which is a very powerful spell. Tempest gains stuff like Shatter and Call Lightning. A lot of abilities that just aren't on their list to add into their already pretty potent list. They may not get the Fireball at 3rd level, but they still get a lot of powerful stuff. Spirit Guardians can really help out. They can do Life Transference, which is a really fun way of heal and not heals as well.
Mm-hmm.
But they get Dawn at 5th level, and 5th level spells, and Dawn is just amazing, really.
Oh, Dawn.
I mean, I agree with you with the flexibility. It's funny, I don't have a lot of experience with Cleric. I played it once. This was years and years ago, like 10 years ago, but played it once. It was also a War Cleric, mostly just because I was with a whole group of melee and wanted to be able to kind of throw heavy armor on and stay with the group as they were doing stuff. But yeah, I agree with you. I mean, you already mentioned like the Nature subclass and Death. Trickery is a real kind of fun one as well, which is... each of their domains are very different themes, right? And so it feels like they're just very flexible, not only the skill sets, but sort of the style you can take with it. I mean, you could have like a trickery cleric that you're not even really doing that much cleric stuff and just being
like
kind of sneaky.
More of a rogue.
Yeah, and you're just kind of being more roguish, and people might not even realize that you're a cleric right away. So yeah, and then of course the whole channel divinity options. I mean, especially turn undead. You've gotten to use that this campaign a couple times, I think, Ginger, and that's been a really powerful spell, especially if in a campaign where you know you're going to come across undead.
Yeah, actually, the second time in the whole campaign was last week before you died. I got to We were trying to catch up to everybody else and we got surrounded by ghosties. And it was very satisfying to see them all pop up on the map and then use destroy undead. And then all of a sudden it was just like, boop, 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 boop. Nope, they're gone. It's like, oh, okay, bye. No problem.
Yeah, and I think to touch upon the domains a little more too, while a druid is overall nature based in some sort of, or nature in terms of like the stars or the land or the moon, stuff like that. Clerics are a religion to everything. So you think of cults and you think of all kinds of followers. They can be like a nature follower, or they can be one of death. They can be one of peace. They can be one of trickery. Like they have so many options available to them that they can be flavored in almost every way.
Yeah, they can also serve an evil deity.
Yeah, for sure. Cults are typically looked at as evil. So by kind of that sort of stigma of it. So by all means, like you could be a cult cleric or an acolyte of some deity of death who just wants you to kill things.
I mean, you even have the grave domain, which is, the keeper of souls in a sense. So yeah, there's definitely some dark ways you can go with it.
Yeah, and they're a D8 hit die, so they're kind of on the medium level of tankiness. They can at least at base wear medium armor, which is pretty good for a caster as well. And quite a few of their domains uniquely adds the heavy armor added to them. War Cleric does that. Weirdly enough, the Life Cleric also does that. I think the Light Cleric does it too, but there's ones around that adds to the heavy armor, which just means you stack in a little bit of strength, but instead of dex, because otherwise you at least want them 2 points into dex for the medium bonus.
Yeah, I made strength my dump stat.
Yep.
But you didn't have to.
Well, I mean, no regrets, honestly.
It wasn't without warning. It's fine.
Yeah, honestly, no regrets. If I was specifically...
You sure?
Yes. If I was...
No regrets even after you went to hit my character and it did nothing?
Okay, that was a special circumstance.
It was very entertaining.
I mean, whenever you took the spell sniper, you weren't planning on being in front of people's face.
Correct.
So it does make sense to not be focusing on the strength.
It honestly hasn't affected the way I wanted to play her. Fits much better with her personality too. And I don't think I would change it. I think that if I did want to try to play a war cleric again, I would try it just to like fully embrace the possibilities of that build. But being a Gestalt, I wanted to emphasize more the other side of things with the spell sniper abilities. And I feel like that's worked out fine for me. So yeah, no regrets, but it is nice to have access to that whole cleric spell list though.
Yeah, I think a lot of the campaign was revolved around the war cleric part in general. So it's a much more of a story-based reason rather than using it for its potential.
Exactly.
Because I would say in terms of the combat aspect, you're definitely trying to be more of a life cleric for sure, especially with the way Domino kind of values a bit of the life and trying to help people and stuff. I wouldn't say necessarily peace, but that could be an option as well. But I think she's much more of the life cleric, just trying to heal everyone, even the bad people.
If we suddenly saw Domino like mixing it up in the middle of melee with us, it'd be like, you okay? I think it would probably be a little out of character. But that's the thing too. I said before about how flexible their domains feel, and that plays really well with what we talked about in other sessions of personalities of your character, right? Like you can, even within a domain, there's a lot of flexibility. Nature could be more druidy. There's other ones in their life you could even kind of flavor in a druid sense, peace. But yeah, you can really combine a lot of like your character's personalities with just a plethora of the different domains they have.
Yeah, I feel like for sure that I picked her 2 classes for this campaign based on the story I wanted to tell and not necessarily the utility. And then I kind of found a balance that I enjoyed playing in the combat parts. But her whole sort of like warpath thing was like not her choice, right? So it makes sense that she would sort of lean away from the utility of that anyway. So yeah, it's worked for me. I know I get a lot of flack for selling my +1 Morningstar, but I needed diamonds.
You have no weapon. You're using a knife I threw away multiple sessions ago.
I'm using the Rod of Resurrection, okay? And we need it, okay? So I only have 2 hands, all right? Leave me alone.
I also think before we move on from the cleric, I think for anyone who is considering playing a cleric, I would probably say that they're a version of a paladin if you want to be more of a caster side. For a lot of the flavor and kind of spells that a cleric does, it's kind of similar to a paladin, but obviously much more spellcaster focused. A lot of the domains and stuff can tailor them into other ways, just like being a Tempest cleric where you can be lightning, or like she said, a war cleric, which is getting the smites from a paladin, or druid kind of stuff like that. It provides another spell list for if you want to be, have a cleric spell list, but also want to be a wizard, or be a prepared caster, but a wizard and stuff like that. So cleric has that potential to be any other class, but with the cleric flavor.
And one other thing too is with clerics is divine intervention. I mean, if you know you're playing in a campaign that's like, a longer time base, for example, or a higher level campaign, the usefulness and the power of divine intervention can be really, really strong, and probably the bane of a DM's existence at a certain point. But yeah, Ginger, you probably have some things to say about divine intervention. You've used that quite a bit.
Boy, do I have feelings about divine intervention. Yeah, I feel like it gets homebrewed a lot. Like specifically how it works depends on each group that's playing and each DM and how they're comfortable using it, because rules as written on it are a little bit vague. A lot of it is kind of like
as are a lot of rules on this game.
Yeah, in general, but this is one of the bigger, like, I guess potentially most powerful vague ones there is. Like a lot of the more really powerful spells are very specific, and this one just isn't. So it's up to a lot of interpretation. The way that we're using it, it can only be used for certain functions, but it definitely still, if it hits, can be huge. Yeah, for sure. I mean, when you can use it to replicate any spell that a cleric would know, even if it's a cleric like in another domain, as long as your deity would be like familiar with it or whatever, is kind of how we play it. It saves you, components, it saves you time, it saves you all kinds of things. Like I've used it for True Resurrection, which is 25,000 gold worth of diamonds, I think.
Yeah.
So it just was like, hey, can you do that? He said, sure, no problem. And did it for free.
And that's the time of it. I mean, it's, again, if you know the campaign's going to be long, our current campaign, I think we're 3.5, like, no, more than that. We're like 4 years into our current campaign, and it's something you can do every 7 days. So, and of course it's based on a better chance the higher level you are, and we're high level. So yeah, I mean, in the right situations, it can really be extremely helpful.
I will say he has never answered me during combat, though. See, he's not a war cleric either.
Nah, you got that.
He's like, you got this, girl. You don't need me for anything. But yeah, but in between combat, he is so there for me.
He knows you're a strong, independent woman that occasionally just needs a little bit of help.
Yeah, exactly. But counter to cleric, I think sort of like character-wise, something that could be a similar vibe, but I feel like usually doesn't turn out that way, is monk. Right? That's kind of the flip side. You have sort of traditional Western sort of religion stereotypes versus like Eastern religious stereotypes, like your air temple versus the water temple versus so like, how do you flavor a monk, and do you think about, like, because I know Tuki, you played a monk in our last campaign, like that campaign was kind of short. I don't feel like we really went into a ton of his specifics, but like, did you have a specific monk related like backstory for him?
Yeah. I definitely flavored him that like martial arts style kind of person. And it's funny because he was actually
so stereotypical.
I know. He was even Mercy was his subclass because I wanted to have a little bit more healing, and I flavored. I'm trying to remember what it was. I think punches were healing and kicks were damage. So it was this funny mix of, even in the same round, of, punching one person to heal them and then kicking another creature to damage.
I feel like
them.
that's a very Jackie Chan vibe.
Yeah, I mean, it was a lot of fun. And of course, monks are the higher levels you go, they're pretty fast. They have a lot of action economy with their ki. But yeah, I mean, it was only short. I definitely did not create mine super well. So while I had a lot of fun with it, there was definitely things I learned after playing that I was like, I probably could have changed up some things, which again is fine. Maybe I'll try it again sometime, maybe not. But yeah, I enjoyed it. And the ki, the whole idea of how they have ki and how they use it is very different from other classes. Provides a lot of different opportunities for what you might do in combat.
I definitely stand by what I said about when you're the one that has the majority of the healing, that the party would just expects you to just be that, because I still to this day am constantly like, you were a cleric in our last campaign, right? And you're like, no, I was a monk. Like, oh yeah, I forgot. But you definitely did become the de facto healer a little bit, I think.
Yeah. Part of that was because I tried to do both. Lessons learned for any new players out there. Try to, you can always find a way to do it. For me, I tried to do both the damage and healing, and then sort of ended up spreading myself a little bit too thin to both. But the healing was...
Because the healing couldn't keep up.
Exactly. So the healing was having a harder time keeping up, but at the same point, I had more of it, because then I kept trying to improve it a bit. And that was also a monk druid character. So yeah, the healing did end up being what they were doing more so, but that's just because I wasn't fully utilizing the damage. But again, with the ki, it's not even always about the damage. You could do a stunning strike, or you could do both damage and healing on the same turn. So kind of a plus and minus. Yeah, definitely flexibility.
Luckily, clerics, while stereotypically are considered a healer in a lot of games and stuff, D&D doesn't require almost any of that. You could be 5 barbarians and still clear it. It all depends on the kind of campaign you're rolling, of course, and the setting and things like that. Usually, if a DM's good enough, he should be tailoring it to those types of groups, not, oh, you're not a balanced group, well, you're not going to win, because you shouldn't need a tank. You shouldn't, you could do a 5 wizards the same way you could do it with 5 barbarians or however many. In terms of monks, I think that they have more of a state of being with them is a good way to put them. What they channel, you could kind of think of them sort of like harnessing, like a sorcerer is innately having it, and they have it, but they have to unlock it. They get the ancestral dragon, just like sorcerers have draconic. They have the drunken master. They have the 4 elements. They have the cobalt soul, the astral self. So they have a lot of those kinds of options that brings them into, again, kind of their state of being, and chooses that. Those end up being typically a big punch kind of person, of course, or having a dedicated monk weapon, which is really cool. Despite them being a D8, one of the lower of the health pools, I think they're with rogues. They're almost equally as hard to kill, especially in later levels, which is really cool. You get that feeling of the, like you guys said, Jackie Chan kind of dodging around and blocking everything, catching arrows and stuff with their hands, which is really cool.
We have a monk in our current campaign, and you cannot hit him.
I cannot. I'm trying.
He is the luckiest.
He has the DM god. I'm the master, but there's a god watching over him.
Yeah, I don't know what it is. His AC is not even that high, and he is unhit. He just flows like water. You could not hit that dude at all.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's the mix because it's a monk rogue, so it's all the proficiencies, the resistances, movement in general, because monks get a lot more movement. Like you said, deflect missiles. I mean, what's cooler than just grabbing an arrow out of the air?
Yeah.
I think, was it slow fall they naturally have? And then, yeah, I mean, all their different subclasses are just, I don't know. It's funny because, again, I didn't necessarily do my monk correctly, but I always look at them as having some of the most cool/unique styles to their subclasses. You even mentioned the way of the 4 elements, but I mean, that's basically a way to channel their ki into casting spells, sort of. So it, and Mercy was somewhat of a healing style or support style.
And they get so many,
really
so many immunities too. As they advance, they develop like immunity after immunity after immunity. We've had several puzzles or like traps in this campaign where you've been like, aha, and then this goes off and it's poison, and he's always just like, oh, I'm immune to that. You're like, foiled again.
Yeah, and then even higher, he eventually they gain Diamond Soul, which just gives you proficiency in all of saving throws. Like, just there you go, which is really cool. And whenever he fails one, he can re-roll it, use a key point to re-roll it, and take the second result. So he could potentially try to succeed it too.
It can end a charm effect.
Yeah, you can just end charm effects, which is really cool. And you can bait people.
He doesn't age.
Yeah, eventually they don't age.
They literally just don't age.
I think one of the downsides to monks is their damage doesn't keep up with most of the other damage dealers.
Mm-hmm.
Martial characters in general have a hard time, fighters being the closest to a true martial character that tries to keep up. And then rogues can do it because the sneak attack is uniquely strong. But monks typically drop off towards the later part of their game. Unfortunately, I feel like monks have the sort of downside where their base isn't powerful enough. So you're kind of stuck with a few specific subclass options if you want to deal damage or something specific. And that's not it. I feel like it should be reversed, where like a cleric is a great example of it. Cleric is a very strong, just base cleric. And then the subclass should augment that base to be whatever the flavor is. But a monk is more like, here's some generic things, and here's something that if you want to actually deal some damage, you have to be the Way of Shadow or something like that.
Well, their martial side, their damage is dependent on a lot of smaller hits, and anytime you have to do a lot of hits, that means you have to hit on each of those.
Yeah.
Versus, rogue, if you can just get that one hit off, well, there you go. You got that hit and sneak attack. But yeah, monk definitely is like, a bunch of hits. You got flurry of blows. I mean, obviously for styling, it's really cool. But it could become a little tricky late game. But you could definitely find pairings with it, whether it's a Gestalt or you take some levels in other classes too to kind of counteract it. But yeah, by itself, it could be a little tricky. I would say, I don't know about you guys, but for me, I view monk as being not the most difficult, but one of the slightly more challenging classes to play efficiently.
Yeah, I could see that.
Stunning Strike, though, is also like one of the strongest abilities in the game.
Super powerful.
But again, it's another one of those things that doesn't scale well, because like while the power of the ability itself stays the same, the spell save for the monk doesn't ever really get super high, and it tends to be like a pretty easy save for like high level enemies to make. So it's like when it hits, it really feels like fate fate happened or something, like you got really lucky. But if it does hit, it's like an amazing thing to have in your arsenal.
Yeah, and on high levels, constitution saves tend to be pretty absurd for a lot of characters and stuff. But that sort of also adds into the other thing I was going to say with monks, is that they're also a mad build. So they want 3 stats, while like a cleric, as we just talked about, they typically want 2 stats. They want their spell stat, and then they want, usually constitution is almost a universal stat that everyone wants some points into.
Meh.
But for monks, they want wisdom, dex, and they want constitution. Especially being a melee, you want even a little more constitution typically.
Right.
So they'd have to max out their wisdom and their dex to be efficient on both sides. And it's splitting off your damage too, because they don't, unlike a caster or a paladin, for example, they don't get more damage from wisdom as much. It helps with their saves. But to deal more damage, they would need more dex to add into those modifiers. So that kind of ends up being a split focus, which kind of sucks, because then you're choosing the utility aspects that you really kind of want to do. Because yeah, Stunning Strike is the most powerful, easy hits in the game to do. And if you bring that up enough, that thing could still have a pretty decent DC. Like it could be up to 20 to DC if you max out wisdom, like a cleric would max out their wisdom.
Yeah, I should have done that.
And again, rule of cool, level 15, they don't even need to eat or drink.
I know.
They just exist.
I just want that in real life.
Oh, don't we all?
Can you imagine the money you'd save?
I wish I didn't need to sleep, or even trance would be really cool.
I know. That's
You
why.
could be an elf monk.
That's why I like being an elf, because it allows
Sure.
me to live out my fantasy of never actually having to sleep anymore.
Yeah, it's just a waste of time.
Speaking of waste of time,
Yes.
Okay.
rangers.
Oh.
I say that with all nice
All the love.
intentions because I'm going to be playing a ranger soon.
Rangers get so much flack, and maybe, back in the day it was a little bit deserved, but there are so many cool ranger subclasses now. I feel like ranger is one of the most underrated classes, and I will also be playing a ranger again soon. I played a ranger last campaign, and I'm going to try a different kind of ranger next time.
So I think one of the biggest problems that started with Rangers is on the player's handbook. They had these really cool flavored things like favored enemy and natural terrain or natural explorer, and all these features that were like super hyper focused that if you didn't see that terrain or didn't see that monster, you automatically didn't have features. And that was really kind of crappy for a ranger, where you're like, okay, most of this area needs to be in a forest or else I'm useless.
Yeah.
And we have to be fighting dragons.
Yeah.
It's like, okay.
Yeah. I do think that stigma of like that kept happening to people is a little bit on the DMs out there too, though, right? Because like you tailor your setting to your players. And if you have a player that they're never going to get to use any of their abilities unless they're in a forest, like throw a forest in there. Don't be a dick.
I do agree. Like I'm starting off on our one campaign where I did say we were going to be underwater for a majority of it, but I did throw in caves and stuff where it would still be useless. And maybe you don't want it to be. But I think favorite enemy was a bigger problem because it's a specific beast or type, or creature type, so aberrations or something. Even in this campaign, where it's a long campaign, it was noted to be fiend related. There's a lot of entities in there that aren't fiends, and there's many combats where you're like, well, none of these are my favorite, so scrap this for now. I think their revised ones from Tasha's, being like favorite foe and deft explorer and stuff, added a more general utility while still being a cool flavor. And what I do like about favorite foe in particular is it replaces the need for Hunter's Mark, because Hunter's Mark, it was mandatory, and at least gives you the option to not have to use Hunter's Mark and save your spell slots for the cool flaming arrows you wanted to do.
Exactly.
You don't have that many spell slots.
Yeah, those options definitely opened some things up. Yeah, like you said, favorite foe, it's way more applicable to a whole host of situations instead of very, very specific ones. And then what was the other one? Deft Explorer is another one that is just overall some good like survivability to have. Ranger is another one. I mean, I know I said Monk was probably a more challenging class. I think Ranger could be another one. Maybe not that high up there, maybe like medium wise, but they could also have a little bit of difficulty to it. But another one that does have quite a bit of like fun versatility to it, a lot of different styles to it.
Or Hunter.
Yeah, definitely Hunter, like a Beastmaster, so you have your faithful companion with you. Then you even have really unique ones like Gloomstalker and Swarmkeeper, and you could just be a bug ranger or something. It could be what you want.
Yeah, I think rangers stick to the stereotypical ranger the most out of the other classes, because a lot of them have like these really crazy outlandish things that are like, okay, is that really what like a fighter would be, or something like that? Like they still have the base flavor of a fighter, but it's so out there that you're like, it could be easily another subclass for another class. While like rangers, they're most of their stuff are hunter kind of style, the hunter ranger kind of like Gloomstalker, which is, basically a hunter. You got Monster Slayer, which is a hunter for monsters, like, so they all kind of hit that same.
There's literally a hunter.
Yeah. There's literally a hunter. And so you really get what you want in a cool way, because I also love like Gloomstalker was one of those that I picked for my subclass before, partially because I found it to be really fun, sort of like the cave dweller sort of style and the powerhouse that subclass can be too is really cool. But definitely once they've been reworked, I think hunters can definitely have a comeback because they're pretty powerful classes once you get a lot of their stuff on board and getting through their subclasses and stuff. They also have a D10 hit die, which is fairly tanky, like the same as a fighter. They get to wear medium armor.
I was about to say that.
So they could be just as much of a dual wielding style attacker like Legolas kind of was whenever he dropped his bow, or he could be Legolas where he's shooting the bow, which is neat.
Well, and the fighting, I mean, yeah, definitely the beefierness with the armor and the health, and then even the fighting style. I mean, technically you can even make yourself tougher or specialize in a certain type of fighting style, which is always fun. Definitely have some flexibility. And spells, I mean, they definitely have access to spells, and they can. But I think you said this earlier. They don't have that many spells compared to others.
Yeah, they're like a third caster, I think.
Yeah,
I think the reason I picked Ranger for our last campaign is because I feel like it's a really automatic when you think of like a fantasy setting. That's the one character you want in your party, right? Like that's like that's Aragorn. He was a ranger, and like it's like the wild.
Yeah, if you want to be Aragorn or Legolas, the two coolest
people ever in the history of fantasy, arguably. And also like everybody, it gets, especially like you said before Tasha's, it got kind of a lot of crap, but like the Beastmaster Ranger is such a like staple of a fantasy setting. Yeah, exactly. And I do think that the Primal Companion like optional replacement is much better than the original like Ranger's Companion way that it worked. That way, because you finally get into your fantasy game, right? And you're like, I'm gonna have a pet wolf. This has been my dream since I was 3 years old, and I saw Balto and or White Fang or Call of the Wild or whatever, like this is something everybody fantasizes about when they're a kid, and you want to do that in your game. But the old way, with the Ranger's Companion rules, like a lot of times people will just be like terrified to use their companion in combat.
Yeah, they don't scale nearly as well.
Yeah.
And, like you're just afraid that they're going to get killed. And, nobody wants the dog to die. I think I've mentioned on the podcast before that my only rule for this fiend-based campaign was like, kill a dog in front of me and I quit, right? Like, I don't want to deal with that. Like if I have a pet dire wolf, it has to live the whole campaign. And it's hard. It's hard to keep them alive. And a lot of times they can be detrimental to whatever you're doing, right? Like there have been very famous campaigns where people had like, say, a pet bear that, you're doing a stealth mission in a mine shaft. And it's like, well, what are we going to do with our bear? But the Primal Companion makes it where it's a summoned creature and you can change it into other forms. And so, in our ocean campaign...
And it could be different creatures and stuff, too.
Yeah, so in our ocean campaign, I had a pet octopus named Jeff, which was spelled a ridiculous way that I can't even remember now. There were so many extra unnecessary letters, but...
There was a Z in there, I think.
There was a Z, yeah. It started with a Z. I mean, she was kind of French, so it just, Jeff, so it just sounded better. But Jeff was great. Because I was using the Primal Companion rules, like he was actually pretty tanky for a small beast. He had like, I think 50 something HP or something at like, I think we started, what did we start? Level 8 that campaign? Level 5? I can't remember.
It's probably level 5.
He was tanky enough that I used him. I used him in the fights, and he was amazing at grappling. And as a Yuan-Ti and as a spear gun user, I was amazing at grappling. And then I also had a spell that grappled, and then I was immune to grapple. So Casa was very kind of one trick, but she would get out there and just pin down everything and be like, all right, nothing can move. Everyone kill stuff. I'm just going to stand here and, keep things from moving. And it was so much fun. It was so much fun to fight with like a giant pet octopus. Like I adored him to pieces. And then it turned out he was a baby kraken, and that was really cool too.
One of the things that I like that they did it with the Primal Companion. Me as a druid, there was a similar thing that happened where we could pick an of the land, a beast of the land, of the sea, or something like that. And I thought that was a really great way to have summons be simpler, but still have a flavor to them. I personally am kind of cool with having a specific feature there, like say the octopus can still have the ink cloud, for example, to add a little more to them rather than being too generic. Unlike 1D&D where they're trying to also add that to Druid's wild shape, and I get wild shape is really complex and annoying and blah blah blah, but that's their main feature, and it's so cool to be a tiny spider to go around and search and stuff. But a pet for a ranger, you want the thing to just be there for you when you need it and go do the thing. It doesn't need to be flavored and tailored and stuff, because usually for a ranger, your companion, like that's your companion, like you've been with him probably for years and stuff. You're not going to change him out like you would change a wild shape to tailor what you need it to be.
Yeah, totally.
And that's the other thing too about it. I mean, we kind of talk somewhat negatively about like favorite enemy and natural explorer, but at the same point, from like a style perspective and a character personality or like uniqueness, things like favorite enemy, natural explorer could really give a player the opportunity to customize their character, and you could potentially be ridiculously strong in certain settings too, which is kind of fun. I don't think it's the only class that has that customizing based on where and what you're fighting, but it's definitely
not directly, no.
Not directly, but it definitely has quite a bit towards it, so which is fun.
Clerics sort of get that with the undead kind of stuff, but it's an additive to an already powerful class rather than your main focus. Yeah, I do agree that the favorite enemy and natural explorer were really cool ideas, and I totally get it. It just didn't work out the way that it should have, because most campaigns just don't have one type or one terrain or something.
Right.
And to have to keep throwing in that forest so that the ranger gets to use its feature sucks. But then if he doesn't get it enough or he gets it too much,
It's the inflexibility, but like maybe, for example, if they allowed you to like swap it every so many levels or something, because maybe you've been in a new area now for years and you're adept at that area, you know?
You do eventually get additional terrains at like 6th and 10th level, and I think it's favorite enemies 6th and 14th. So it does kind of get there, but you'll still go through most levels. If you start at level 1, that means you're not going to get one to level 6, and you probably done a lot of content by that point. But yes, having some sort of maybe optional feature that could have changed it, but then it doesn't necessarily make sense because you're actually losing the previous type, and that's thematically is kind of weird. It's just like why sorcerers are so limited to their changing of spells, because they're almost born with that power, so it just comes to them. So to change it out is like you don't have access to a power you innately had anymore. So like that's why they had to limit it so much. Originally, you couldn't even change spells like that.
That's interesting. You can also like mix and match too, right? Because like while for Casa, I picked the Primal Companion like replacement option because it made more sense because I wanted to like fight with my companion. I still did stay with Natural Explorer for her because our specific setting, it was more of a benefit.
Was one.
Yeah. Randy was like, we're going to be in the ocean. And I was like, cool. My favorite terrain is the ocean. and you would be surprised though, like how often I couldn't use it, because like you said, we had cave systems, we had ruins, we had things that weren't in the ocean, so it still got, we mixed it up a lot. But
yeah, it doesn't count if you're on a beach all of a sudden.
Yeah, exactly. But they also, the things that came in really in handy were like, if you're by yourself, you get advantage on stealth, and like your party cannot be magically lost or can't get lost by magical, except by like magical means or something. So like there were things that I had that from Natural Explorer that actually we did use that benefited the party a lot. But for my next ranger that we're doing for our campaign 4, I will be doing the Deft Explorer instead. So we'll get to see how that works.
The Depth Explorer does a lot of similar stuff with Nature Explorer by adding the skill proficiencies and the expertise, because if you roll a successful survival check, you're not going to get lost either. It's not as guaranteed, of course, but it's more generally useful, which is really neat, because it is kind of dumb that like, oh, you're in a forest so you don't get lost, but in a grassland all of a sudden like you don't know where the heck you're
Your
going.
sense of direction
is kind of silly.
disappears.
Yeah. All of a sudden, yeah, exactly. Oh, sorry, we're in a jungle this time. But isn't that kind of like a forest? Nah. Completely different terrain. I don't know where we are.
Yeah. Well, even for the Depth Explorer, you automatically off the top too, like at level 1, it's a level 1 feature, just like natural. Off the top, you can speak, read, and write 2 additional languages, which is also like pretty huge.
Cool.
Yeah. And it's just like one of the extra
just
things.
General usability.
Yeah. And it gives you a lot of proficiencies. For my next character, it also gave me a really nifty spell that I'm excited about. We can't talk about it too much because it's spoilers for each other.
Oh, I think the 2 extra languages unintentionally, I think it could definitely be intentional, but it kind of can emphasize the favored enemy a little bit, even if you didn't pick that feature, because you get to pick 2 languages, and you could have the Underdark language for aberrations, or the Draconic language for dragons or something. So like you still can kind of get that favored enemy from it. So that's kind of neat
for sure.
as well.
And I mean, just the word explorer, like these rangers are supposed to be, they range, they travel a ton, and they're in lots of different areas. And so it makes sense that they would pick up, more interactions with different cultures, different languages. And it's nice that that reflects that.
Yeah.
They definitely have some unique, I mean, not a ton of different spell options, but their spells are also a little bit unique, kind of like marks, traps, detection-based things, even like influences, again, from druid, from fighter, a little bit of rogue, depending on your subclass. So there's definitely uniqueness to them, kind of mixed in with that overall explorer, and definitely some interesting combinations I think you can come up with.
I do like that they get a few smite spells for the melee, and then they have a few different flavored arrow spells and stuff like that to go that sort of arcane hunter as a base feature, which I think is very appreciative, because why can't I just dip my arrow in fire? Well, then just get the flame arrows. Like it's the same, like there you go.
Yeah, I mean, magic, that's another thing that's so iconically classic fantasy, is like the magic arrow, right? Like
yeah.
The black arrow that took down Smaug, or, like I don't know why they're all from Lord of the Rings, but
and yet fighter got the arcane archer.
Right?
Yeah, that doesn't track.
See, now I'm just picturing a pyromaniac ranger who's just always looking for fire to dip his arrows into. So then he just had to make it himself.
Or there would be like an oil, like a tar pit. They're like, hold on. They dip all their arrows. And then next time they like light them.
He needs
with the flint,
alchemy jug.
Yeah, there's something very universally appealing about, really efficient survivalists, I guess.
I think the favorite thing about a ranger, something that kind of I sort of end up working at with other games and stuff as archetypes. I don't like to be like the pure mage usually, or the pure fighter. I like the mix. Like I think a warlock always kind of fits a sort of like a battle mage, where they're a little bit tankier than a mage, but they're also more of a spellcaster than like a fighter or something like that. And a ranger is that split to being just as efficient with melee, as efficient as range, and then they could do a little bit of casting, and it's really cool there. So I think they're a unique blend of doing a little bit of everything that people typically like to do if they don't want to be a pure class.
And you don't have to be, I mean, we talked about this a bit before, but like you don't have to be a perfect character, right? I mean, you can have some flaws. Rangers may have some flaws here and there, but then really strong cases as well. And yeah, I mean, that's perfectly fine. You don't have to be maximum damage or maximum whatever it is you're doing. You could still have plenty of fun being different.
You don't even have to be alive, right, Tuki?
I mean...
Should we go make you a new character?
Wait, are you not bringing me back?
I mean...
Uh-oh.
This is the Flash Round, where we take turns creating the bones of a character that anyone can use. If you play one, let us know who they become. Roll initiative.
I got a 5.
I got a 10.
Oh, I'm definitely going to beat you guys.
Oh, yeah?
I got A 17. With my bonus, it would be an 18.
It's because I'm rolling with my dead silica dice.
Wow. All right. Too soon. Just died like a day ago.
Whoa, spoilers.
You'll be back. You'll be back.
So I'm going this week, huh? Let's go with a fire genasi.
Ooh.
Mm.
Yeah, burn, baby, burn.
Oh, okay. Hold on. This could be good. So for class, let's go with Paladin.
Why?
No, that seems like the obvious choice.
Yeah. That's what I thought.
Okay, subclass. We're going to go Paladin of Conquest.
Why?
Because I know you're into those.
Am I?
And for appearance, as a fire genasi, he kind of has almost like a molten lava sort of build to him. He kind of has little cracks that sort of reveal a intense fire, but his head has more of a hairstyle that it's definitely like hair. It's not anything other than hair, but has the style where it goes a little bit yellow to orange on his hair to make it imitate fire.
It's a pretty sweet look.
Right?
It was like reverse Backstreet Boys, like Frosted Roots.
Yeah, exactly. Like instead of ramen noodles, it's a like oven of fire.
How did we go from Backstreet Boys to ramen noodles? Okay, you know what? It's fine. For their background, all right, they like to conquest. And in order to do that, you got to travel. So they're going to be an outlander.
Oh, that's useful.
Dot,
All right,
dot,
so
dot.
their quirk is while they're traveling, they... Okay, this is very specific. While they're traveling, every night when they make camp, somebody has to be the person who cooks. And it's their job to decide, to keep track of whose turn it is. But the way that they decide whose turn it is whoever asks first, hey, who's cooking? They always just go, it's your turn. And it takes potentially a really long time for the party to catch on to the system.
But like, so for him being lawful, well, then his ideals will be that he believes in the honor system. So as long as they catch on to that system that you're talking about, then he'll abide by it. If it's his turn, it's his turn. But if it's not his turn, then it's your turn.
That's how the system works.
Yeah.
All right, then. So for his bonds, we're going to go with his closest allies are the ones who help bring him victory. In his eyes, at least. Better hope he thinks you help him achieve victory.
Well, so you got to stay on his good side.
True.
His phobia is that one of his closest allies will one day betray him.
Uh-oh. For his item, he'll have this specific sea glass that he got when he was a child. It was given to him by someone, but he's trying to figure out who gave it to him.
No one knows. It's a mystery.
Could have been no one even.
Maybe it was a water genasi, a little friend of his that he just doesn't remember. And it was like that movie Elemental.
I was going to say that too.
They brought it from the sea. Maybe it was the heart of the ocean.
They sound very powerful, right? So now they need a powerful name like Flunwin. 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 Good luck with that one. Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed this session and want to hear more, you can find us on Twitter at DysFictionalPod for our latest updates and downloads.
Original music for this podcast is provided by Joshua Silver, the artist known as Dimanon on Spotify.
Have a great week out there, everybody. And remember, if the forecast calls for acid rain, stay home.